Ranking every La Liga runner-up team. Again, since 03-04, again here's the criteria. Brace yourself for bastard barrels of Barca talk. Let's roll on. Number 22, Barcelona 2021-2022. Right, so given that the vast majority of these entries will be either Barcelona or Real Madrid, that's just how it is in Spain, there are very few teams here you can point to and say they didn't deserve second place. This side, though, may be one of the few exceptions. And that's even if you take into account a 4-0 away Clasico win. Yep, it was still pretty shit. Knocked out of the group stages of the UCL, their top scorer was an Arsenal reject who joined in January, and they tallied the least amount of points by a Barca side since 2008. And listen, I've said this many times before, Barca's downfall was very gradual and plainly foreseeable if you took some time to study a graph or two. But that doesn't change the fact that 21-22 was where those very graphs truly bottomed out. Number 21, Real Madrid 2008-2009. Good Christ, this was bad. Right, so let me get this straight. Bernd Schuster the previous season took Real Madrid to La Liga glory, where they were not only 18 points clear of Barcelona, but won the damn thing with about 3 games to spare. But due to a dodgy phase in autumn that year, he was let go just like that. Why was I even surprised? But yeah, it sure didn't get better. One day Ramos took over, lost the Clasico in his very first game, was humiliated in another Clasico later that season, faced even worse humiliation in Europe at the hands of Liverpool, ending his miserable few months in charge with 5 losses on the trot. Wow. 20, Barcelona 2019-2020. One of the 2 seasons at the end of Messi's Barca career where he was left alone for most parts of the campaign. Like, don't get me wrong, the likes of Griezmann, Suarez, Alba, Busquets were still around. Hell, Suarez notched in over 20 goals himself, going on a top run at the beginning of that season where he scored 11 goals and got 4 assists in 16 games. But following his knee injury at the turn of the year that caused him to miss almost 2 months of action, the load was largely left to the legend that is Little Leo to lift, labour and limp on with. He did his best, but it just wasn't enough. Number 19, Barcelona 2003-2004. So as far as quote-unquote one-man teams go, this really goes under the radar. And considering it was the debut season of the one-man on said one-man team, it's remarkable how all this unfolded. Ronaldinho's impact on Barcelona was evident from the very start. And I mean that literally, since he did this in his first flipping game. And despite Barca being pretty inconsistent throughout the campaign, particularly during a phase in November where they lost 3 out of 4 games, the exact 4 games Dino missed through injury, surprise surprise, it was obvious that they were just getting started, and it would get a lot more obvious pretty soon enough. Just ask number 18, Real Madrid 2005-2006. Right, so much like the 08-09 side I already spoke about, this was another Real side who changed managers mid-season and were basically a mess throughout. The difference? This side had the likes of Zidane, Beckham, Raul, Ronaldo. Well, Ronaldo when he could be to turn up, so they were always going to do better. Though not by much, cause yes, along with the dilemma of R9 missing a huge chunk of games and seemingly finding those chunks on his person, Real's problems off the pitch extended beyond the one management change to the three different presidential changes. 3 presidential changes in just a few months. So, much like R9 whenever he tried to run between 2 letterboxes in his neighborhood that season, the Galacticos in the end fell flat on their face. Number 17, Barcelona 2023-2024. Ah man, I wish I was talking about Girona. And for a long time, it seemed like I would have been. Bro, these lot were electric that season. If you don't know, look it up while I talk about Barca. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that these guys were more or less flat track bullies, blitzing teams like Getafe, Betis and Vallecano, but then getting double dunked by both Real and Girona. However, considering that they were facing a mini turnover after losing names like Alba and Busquets to Miami, while also looking to integrate new additions such as Lamine Yamal and Gundogan, I guess they can be somewhat excused. 16, Atletico Madrid 2018-2019. Much like in most seasons where Atleti take second spot, it was more because of Real being shit. This was the season after Ronaldo left. Well, he left Real, but clearly not the nightmares of Atleti, bro. And speaking of which, these guys were actually in significantly better form in the UCL before getting CR7'd, because in the league, honestly, not all that special. They won most games they were expected to win, slipped up with regular draws as they always tend to do, while being taken to school by a couple of the big boys. Still had the best defense in the league though, of course they did. It's all they've got. 15. Barcelona 2013-2014. A team that basically stumbled into second place due to Real's late season domestic collapse because of CR7's late season knee collapse, though defining them just off that wouldn't be fair. After all, they did do the double in the league Clásicos, reached the Copa del Rey final narrowly losing another Clásico. I still occasionally pray for Marc Bartra's soul, by the way, poor entity. And at the end of the day had a front six of Messi, Sanchez, Neymar, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, so they could never have been all that bad. Number 14, Real Madrid 2024-2025. Okay, so when Kylian Mbappe finally signed for Real, anyone who's more than a mere casual would have told you that they'd have serious problems. We now have three very similar players playing up front, none of them being centre forwards, in a team who always played with a traditional number 9. And genuinely, once you put these things into that kind of perspective, they honestly did significantly better than I thought they would. Like, sure, they were badly exposed against Arsenal in the UCL, more so in the 2-1 game than the 3-0 one, to be honest, as they tried to just get it out wide and cross it in before realizing that none of their front three are actual competent headers of the ball. That's usually a job for an actual 9. But when you consider that they only missed out on the league by 4 points, and Mbappe himself, despite all the struggles, still managed to break records in his debut season, it really wasn't as bad as you probably remember. Number 13, Atletico Madrid 2017-2018. So this was a trip, weren't it? Because despite both Madrid sides winning both of Europe's primary and secondary cups that year, in the league they instead seemed to be on a mission to see who can fuck up the most each week. And on that particular road, Real began the season great. Well, began the season shit, but great as far as the mission to fuck up, but then derailed in January when Ronaldo woke up and decided that he should be winning matches. What a prick. While Atletico only lost one game in the league right up until March, at times looked to be genuine challengers to the title, but following the loss to the eventual title winners in March, they began dropping points in almost every game, winning only a smidge over 40% of their last 12. So in essence, yes, this was one of those sides who just happened to be second because everyone else was shit. But the aforementioned European success means that I can't rank them all too low. Number 12, Real Madrid 2022-2023. They were European champions the season prior and walked to the league title too without any trouble. So, what went wrong? Well, it's not rocket science, because it's human biology. Building a team around the 35-year-old talisman who was running full steam and bailing you out of so many tight situations would only take you so far for so long, until he starts getting dizzy and needs a lay down. And yeah, basically that, as Big Ben's, while still top class, had to be left out sporadically throughout the campaign due to injuries and general fatigue, leaving his side without a real focal point. And as we have seen as recently as last season, that usually doesn't work out for them. Still won the Copa del Rey though, so that's something. Number 11, Real Madrid 12-13. Crazy to think Jose Mourinho at the time called this the worst season of his career. Ha boy, if you only knew of the shower of shite that was about to follow. But you know, even if we ignore that, this season still wasn't bad, going unbeaten against Barca in 4 games, reaching the Copa del Rey final and losing out in extra time due to shenanigans, and getting to another UCL semi, though admittedly, the cracks did begin to appear, both on the pitch, and as is the tradition with third season Jose, off it too. And if it wasn't for the best player in the world turning it in, week out, in spite of everything that was going on around him, it's safe to say things would have turned out a lot worse than they did. Number 10, Real Madrid 2004-2005. We already spoke about the time where they changed presidents 3 times, and here we have the prior season where they changed managers 3 times, and all that too before the new year. Yeah. But luckily enough, once Vanderlei Luxemburgo did manage to get some time, and especially after he found his preferred 4-3-3 setup of Beckham, Zidane, Gravesen, Ronaldo, Raul and Owen, Christ. Just prior to the April Clásico where they basically ran over Barcelona, Madrid went back to where they were supposed to be. That is, at the very least, a tough test for the rest, very much including the best of the best. Number 9, Villarreal 2007-2008. The most forgotten side on this list, mostly because they're not Barca or Real and partly because they're not Atletico either. But you see, in a strange way, this side followed a very similar story which we all often hear today. They were a team with a standout franchise player in Juan Riquelme, and while very good, could never really push themselves to the next level. Riquelme then leaves midway through the previous season. Villarreal are consequently left without a big name, but become more of a solid team with the likes of Cazorla, Cagni, Robert Pires, as well as one of the most underrated pivots of his generation in Marcus Senna stepping up to the plate. And add to that a back five consisting of names like Diego Lopez, Diego Godin, who seems to pop up in every video nowadays, as well as Benta and Capdevila. You have a group of grafters who would be a problem for any team on their day, and for most parts they were just that, doing the double over Barca and finishing 10 points ahead of them when it was all said and done. Number 8, Real Madrid 2014-2015. If you said this Real side would rank even this low in a list of second place teams during their crazy run from September to December where they legit won 20 games in a row, man, they'd have thought you were crazy. Eventually though, what was always going to happen with the midfield of Modric, James and Cruz happened. That is, they collapsed. And after a 2-1 loss to Valencia in the first game of 2015, Real began showing signs of decline. Following that loss by being humiliated by Atletico in the league, getting knocked out by Atletico in the Copa, but knocking them out of the UCL, so fair enough, eventually finishing a once super promising season with nothing to show for. Number 7, Real Madrid 2020-2021. Why does Zizou always have dodgy starts to league campaigns? Like bro, seriously, he had 3 draws in a row near the start of the 16-17 season, only won 50% of his games in the first half of 17-18, won again only around 50% of his game after the first quarter of 19-20, and won again only 50% of his games in the first quarter of 2021. Yeah, why? And in this instant, that is what ultimately cost him the title, as Real's 18-game unbeaten run to finish the season off still wasn't quite enough to close the gap on Atleti, losing it by 2 points in the end on the final day. But in all honesty, considering the amount of injuries this man dealt with that season, him still being able to come this close to retaining the title while also reaching the UCL semis just confirmed what the competent of us already knew. Even on the management side, Zizou is the real deal. Number 6, Barcelona 2016-2017. As highly as they rank here, this was really the season where we fully established that MSN weren't really all that. Doesn't mean they were bad. Hell, they scored 111 goals between them that season alone, which along with the cup win is mainly why they ranked so high. But they were far from the greatest trio of all time, with Enrique's further attempts to give up a bit of that midfield control and patient build-up in favour of more direct and explosive attacks to cater to MSN, ultimately costing Barca in games that year, being bettered by sides like Malaga, Deportivo and Alaves in the league, and being humiliated in 2 rounds in a row, 4-0 by PSG and 3-0 by Juventus in the Champions League. And while a late season recovery plus a mini slump by Real around January did push the title race to the wire, it was pretty much evident from the start who the second best was. Number 5, Barcelona 2006-2007. You may at first roll your eyes after seeing a Barca side who totaled 76 points finishing above a Barca side who totaled 90, but as I keep saying, it's all relative and yes, context is key. La Liga in the 2000s was far from a clear 2-horse race, people, because yes, while Barca and Real would more often come out on top, it was a lot more common for other teams to take points off them throughout the season, as evident by Barca, even with a comparatively low 76 points, only losing out on the title that year on head-to-head in the final day. Because as I've also said many times before, this is the greatest title race I've ever witnessed as a fan of football. But the funny thing here was, it wasn't really a title race for huge parts of that season, with Barca on a terrific run with the likes of Eto'o, Messi and Ronaldinho serving up teams, while Real heavily struggled under Capello. It was following Barca's 3-1 loss to local rivals Espanyol at the turn of the year, where the tides too began to turn. But that still doesn't change the fact that in what was back then a much more competitive and tougher environment, and with a spirited Real side very much on their resurgence, Dino and co pushed hard, and pushed hard they did right till the end. Number 4, Real Madrid 2009-2010. As far as Los Blancos, this is their most underrated second place side, and honestly, this for me is mainly down to the manager. boggles the mind how he got sacked after this. An all too familiar story, but equally fucking dumb every time. Bro, this man took over in the very season Real had a complete team overhaul and signed players like Alonso, Kaká, Benzema and Ronaldo. All four he gave over 20 league games to, and he still managed to push arguably the greatest Barcelona team of all time right till the end, even outscoring them in the league. And bro, dare I say, if it wasn't for Ronaldo's autumn time ankle injury causing him to miss the Sevilla loss, Gijon draw and limit him in the away Clasico, we may have seen a mini Madrid miracle by Mr. Manuel's malleable but mint Los Merengues. And to come that close to greatness despite having a squad of, yes, world-class talent, but many guys who've never played alongside each other before, this man was the real MVP that year. Number 3, Barcelona 2011-2012. The beginning of Pep's final season at Barca was solid proof of what I've spoken about a few times now, the downside of Barca's DNA. Because as not only I, but even ex-players of the club have said, playing for this club is almost like learning a new sport. Any new player coming in must learn to adapt and do so quickly. And that season, Cesc Fabregas came in and had the unenviable task of somehow fitting in amidst Barca's greatest midfield trio ever. This caused a short disturbance in the air during a period where they pretty much tried everything with Cesc, playing him as a 10, playing him on the wing, playing him up front, having him as a sub. It was not easy, and as a result, Barca had some early stumbles where they dropped 11 points out of their first 39, and in the year Mourinho's Madrid knocked in a maiden La Liga century, you just can't afford that many slip-ups. And despite both Barca and Fabregas himself recovering pretty quickly by other club standards and eventually not only becoming the only team to take 3 points from the Bernabeu that season, but also win the Copa del Rey while going on an 11-game unbeaten run in the league from February to April, not to mention man like Messi managing to muster his most prolific season ever with 73 goals in all competitions, the damage by then was already done. Number 2, Real Madrid 2010-2011. Mourinho's first season at Real were basically the 1A version of his side the following season where they tallied 100 points. It was the exact same side, just a little less fluid. Even then though, these guys were honestly unlucky to be pitted up against the great Barca side of 2011 and pitted up against them in every single competition, narrowly being bettered by them in the league, definitively being bettered by them in the Champions League, but bettering them in the Copa del Rey. And this is why I say, in most other seasons, we'd honestly be talking about treble winners, but this was without a doubt Jose's greatest second place team. Number 1, Real Madrid 2015-2016. The season prior was a second place Real side who began with a fiery spell but bottomed out in the second half. This season, well, most people would like you to think it was the complete opposite, but you do know Real scored 3 or more goals in over 40% of the league games Benitez was a part of, including 10 goals in one game. So yeah, he wasn't terrible. But yeah, he needed to go. And once he did and Zizou took over, things began to look up pretty much straight away. And let's not get it twisted, Zizou did still have a couple of early stumbles himself, being held by the likes of Real Betis and Malaga and losing the home Madrid derby in late February. But this is where the great man learned up to then his greatest management lesson, because in the very next game, Casemiro came in. And slowly but surely, especially after Gareth Bale returned from the sidelines, Real began to build momentum, finishing the season with 12 straight wins in the league, scoring 3 or more goals in almost 70% of the games, losing the title. A title which at one point seemed miles off their reach as they were left sulking at third place, now by a mere point, and in the end getting their hands on La Undécima. And what do you know? This was just the beginning. And that is that. Agree or disagree? Beats indifference. Once again, don't forget to like, comment and share, and of course subscribe. Till next time, you keep rolling.